welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a pretty chilling military scenario. You know, most people assume a war over Taiwan would, well, start in Taiwan. But what if the very first shots are actually fired hundreds of miles away, in Japan? It's a strategic puzzle with some enormous consequences. So just imagine a war where the opening salvo isn't even aimed at the main target, but at its most important ally. According to some really detailed military analysis, in a conflict over Taiwan, this isn't just some fringe possibility. It's actually the most likely opening move. You know, time and time again, when you look at strategic analyses and really detailed war games, they all point to the same stark conclusion. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan probably wouldn't start with ships crossing the straits. Nope. It would likely begin with a massive barrage of missiles aimed not at Taiwan, but at United States military bases all across Japan. Now, this wouldn't be some random act of aggression. It's a very calculated military doctrine. Think of it like a knockout punch that's designed to neutralize a powerful opponent before they can even step into the ring. And this logic, it's pretty precise, and it has a name. The core concept is called A2/AD, which stands for anti-access/area denial. It's best to think of it in two parts. So anti-access, that's all about stopping forces from even getting into the theater of war. And then area denial, that's about making it incredibly dangerous for any forces that do manage to get in to operate effectively. The way it's described in PLA strategic thinking is that the goal is to preemptively cripple the enemy's ability to project their power. It's kind of like pulling the plug on a super powerful machine before it can even fully boot up. You're just cutting the power right at the source. And this map really shows the threat in stark detail. You can see China's missile systems create these overlapping zones of denial. The first and second island chains, which are home to all these critical US and allied bases, well, they're completely blanketed and well within range. Okay, so if you're going to execute this whole pulling the plug operation, which specific sockets are you targeting? The strategy isn't just about launching a bunch of missiles. It's about hitting the absolute most critical nodes. Chinese military documents and war games have identified a really clear list of priority targets, and bases in Japan are seen as the absolute nerve center for any US response to a Taiwan crisis. See, they aren't just outposts. They're the launch pads, the command centers. They're the entire operation. And these bases, they aren't just dots on a map. They are the literal engines and control panels of American military power in the Pacific. Kadena in Okinawa, that's the core of its air power. Yokosuka, it hosts the entire 7th Fleet. Yokota is the command and control brain. Each one has a vital, interconnected role. And interdependent is really the key word here. The strategy is to strike these nodes all at the same time to trigger a system-wide failure. The goal? Create chaos and paralysis. Buy in those critical hours and days needed for an amphibious landing on Taiwan, while the US response is literally still stuck on the ground. But this entire strategy really hinges on a major asymmetry on the ground, a physical vulnerability that military planners are very, very aware of. And believe it or not, it all comes down to concrete. A recent Hudson Institute report highlights something pretty striking. China has invested a massive amount in protecting its own air assets. We're talking over 3,000 hardened or individual aircraft shelters. They fully expect their airfields to be attacked, and they've prepared for it. So this creates a very dangerous imbalance. As this chart from the report shows, it would take a significantly lower number of missiles to neutralize US and allied airfields compared to what it would take to inflict similar damage on China's hardened and dispersed bases. And this is what we mean by hardening. These concrete shelters can protect $1 billion aircraft from pretty much anything except a direct hit. The problem is they are relatively scarce at key US bases in the region, leaving rows and rows of incredibly expensive jets just exposed on open tarmacs. This vulnerability, this concrete imbalance, it really tips the scales. It could make a preemptive attack look not just possible, but actually logical. For an adversary, it's a tempting, high-reward opportunity to strike first and cripple the response before it even gets going. So what would this opening battle actually look like? Well, we don't have to guess. A really comprehensive war game run by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, simulated this exact scenario 24 times. What they found was that while China would likely fail in its ultimate goal of taking Taiwan,
The victory for the United States and its allies would be, and these are their words, Pyrrhic. The cost would just be absolutely enormous for everyone involved.
I mean, the raw numbers are just staggering. In the most likely scenario, the US and Japan are projected to lose nearly 450 combat aircraft and 43 ships. And notice that asymmetry again. While China's ship losses are way higher, its aircraft losses are significantly lower, thanks in part to that airfield hardening we just talked about. And here's the part that connects it all back to the beginning. The war game found that the majority of US aircraft losses would happen on the ground in the opening hours of the conflict, destroyed by that initial missile barrage. The fight is lost before many planes can even get off the runway. And get this devastating high-tech conflict wouldn't last for months or years. The CSIS wargame projects it would likely be over in just 2 to 3 weeks. It really highlights the brutal speed and intensity of modern warfare. Okay, let's step back for a second and summarize the really crucial points from this whole strategic dilemma. What does this all mean for security in the Indo-Pacific? So the big takeaway here is that the defense of Taiwan is deeply, fundamentally linked to the vulnerability of bases that are hundreds of miles away from its shores. And this creates a really complex and frankly unstable strategic picture, where a first strike could be seen as a decisive advantage. All of this really leaves us with a profound question for the modern age. What does deterrence truly mean when the opening blow can be so swift, so precise, and so devastating? When vulnerability itself becomes an incentive for attack, the old rules, they may no longer apply.